All right, we've covered lots of things. Anything else you wanted to make sure to kind of hit?
So I had one thing that came up while you were talking is that we are observing the universe from our vantage point, right? We're only seeing a slice of the universe, and all of our laws that we're dictating are based on explaining that slice of the universe that we're seeing. Since we can never be fully isolated from the system, right? So, but we know there are other things that exist that we don't know of. So how do you deal with this concept of known unknowns? Like how can you begin to comprehend them? Or
So here's a thing that has come out of sort of the science that I've been doing, is you have this Rulliad, it has a structure, we can scientifically study that structure, but then the question is, what do observers like us observe in this Rulliad? So the question is, what do we need to know about us as observers to deduce that we will observe certain physical laws as we know, as we write them down in textbooks? And what we've discovered is that you actually don't need very many features of observers like us to get pretty detailed laws of physics. So, for example, the fact that we are computationally bounded. The universe is doing all these computationally irreducible things, but to fit it in our minds, it has to be computationally bounded. We can only analyze a slice that is sort of a computationally reducible slice of all the stuff that's frothing around going on underneath. So that's first feature. The other feature is that we believe we are persistent in time, which is kind of a weird thing because at every moment we're made from different atoms of space. So how could it be the case that, we all think, oh, we have a past, we have a memory of the past, it's still us, there's a thread of time, there's a thread of experience that is a single thread of experience. And we are persisting through time. So those two things turn out to be what you need to get general relativity and quantum mechanics, which is sort of two core theories, two core pillars of physics as it's known today. Now you ask yourself, well, if we were not observers like us, how would we perceive the universe? This is a really difficult thing to think about. And I've been interested, as we move outward in rullial space, we are gradually being observers that weren't like the past of us, so to speak. That is, we are, an observer of today is different from an observer. For example, even this thing about using programs as ways to study what happens in the world. 25 years ago, people were like, they didn't have the idea of doing that, and that was an alien idea. No longer an alien idea. And so I think this question of sort of what is the perception of the universe from a point of view different from our own, I find this really interesting. I'm really, really curious about this. I've been trying to poke my science fiction author friends to kind of write about this, and some of them have written some things about it actually. But it's like, there are things, I think about it as sort of what's the distance in rullial space between different entities. So, different human minds are a certain distance apart. They are, the way, like different machine learning systems will be they learnt things in a different way. And so they are perceiving the universe in a slightly different way. But we're able to communicate. It's not so far away in rullial space. As you get people who have different sort of cultural background or whatever else, it gets more and more difficult to communicate. You're sort of further away in rullial space. The concepts that we have are not ones that map as well into concepts that will have developed there. So then you go to, pets, for example. There's certain things you can communicate. The dog wags its tail. There's some emotional thing that we probably have in common with dogs that allows us to understand what's going on. But the full life, the full worldview of the dog, we don't have a good idea what the worldview of the dog is, or the whale, or whatever. And when you get further away than that, it's really difficult to know what is the worldview, of this, what's the worldview of this thing in the physical universe? What's the worldview of a computer even? I was actually trying to write something recently, I finally get it done, about what it's like to be a computer. It turns out it's pretty similar to being, it's funny because, you might think, well, you need to make a whole AI and do all this kind of thing before you can imagine what it's like to be a computer. But you realize that between when the computer is booted and when the computer crashes, it's pretty much like a human life. The computer accumulates a bunch of stuff in its memory. It has certain experiences. Eventually the thing is restarted from sort of the same genetic material, so to speak. It's another cycle. It's before the operating system crashes or whatever. And during its life, it has many things that are surprisingly human-like in terms of sort of its internal perception of what's going on. And it's a case where we can more or less, we can sort of interesting because we have a hard time with human brains. We don't get to record from the 80 whatever it is, 86 billion neurons or whatever people now say typical brains have, 100 billion neurons roughly. Similarly with computers, in principle, we might be able to record every single thing that's happening in the computer, but that's actually not in practice very easy to do. But it's still it's a thing where we, much more than with brains, we say we can point at what's going on inside there. For example, there's no free will to this computer. Mm-hmm. Look, we can see it's got these transistors that are doing this and that and the other. Well, actually, we could do that with brains too. We just don't happen to have the technology to do it at this time. But anyway, this question of sort of what it's like to see the universe from an alien intelligence, very interesting question. I mean, it's a fun thing I wrote about a little